So this lecture video is going to be on integumentary system. Okay, so that's the first organ system that you're going to learn. So let me get the PowerPoint slide for it. Okay, the integumentary system, integument means the skin, the covering. Okay, so when you study cutaneous membrane, we basically study skin because remember serous membrane, mucous membrane, synovial membrane, cutaneous. These are the four types of membrane that we study. So cutaneous membrane is nothing but the skin. Okay, it is it is the largest organ of your body, by the way. You just don't realize that because it's all over the place. It's almost like 10 pounds. And most places is 1 to 2 millimeter thick, but in some places it could be 4 or 5 millimeter thick as well. Okay, and in some places it could be less than 1 as well. Okay, it covers the entire body. So almost like 20 to 22 square feet area. Okay, so that's one of the largest organ of your body. Now, this is where people do often mistake the first line on top of the chapter. The skin has 2 layers, epidermis and dermis. Although we use the word hypodermis pretty often because it's just below the dermis, but it is not the 3rd layer of the skin. It is just the layer that supports the structure of the skin. So if you look at this picture right here, from here to here, that's epidermis. This is dermis, that's skin. This whole layer right there, it's called hypodermis or subcutaneous layer. So below the cutaneous layer. So this is not the part of the skin, but in this layer, we have tons of adipose tissue, areolar tissue, and we have lots of blood vessels. That is why I think I mentioned right here, sometimes you get like a hypodermic needle we use to get that injections over there. So the medicine that comes right here using that hypodermic needle can catch the bloodstream. So that medicine goes into the bloodstream directly right there. So that is why we use that like subcutaneous injection subcutaneously. By the way, that's not the part of the skin. So skin has 2. Epidermis and dermis. Epidermis is made with stratified epithelia, meaning multiple layers of epithelia, squamous, and dermis is made with connective tissue. Okay. Before you go into the detail, the other accessory structure, when you include in it, it becomes the total thing. It's called integumentary system. So hair, glands, and nails. So we are going to first learn epidermis a little bit in detail, dermis a little bit in detail, and then we are going to talk about hair, glands, and nails. So it's very short system, I would say, and it's not very difficult. You need a couple of times reading, and it should be okay. Function of the skin. So number 1 function of the skin is to protection. So from chemical, from mechanical hazards or environmental hazards, your skin is the first layer of defense. So it's an innate defense, meaning you're born with it. So this is the defense system that you're born with it. So that's their first job. Then the additional jobs are excretion, because in the integumentary system, right underneath that, in the dermis layer, we have a lot of sweat gland. So sweat gland, they release a lot of extra salt waste along with some water. So that's excretory system. Temperature maintenance. Basically, all the blood vessels in the dermis layer, what happen is they can vasodilate sometimes. So the vasodilations cause the release of heat, meaning the blood vessels become slightly bigger, or they can constrict their blood vessels. So vasoconstriction can reserve the heat depending on the heat conditions of your body. Synthesis of vitamin D3. So partly done here and then rest done by the liver and the kidney later on. So synthesis of vitamin D takes place in the skin. Then we talked about adipose tissues in the hypodermis, which is not part of the skin, but those some adipose tissue could be in the dermis layer as well. So that's why we say that in this adipose tissue, they can store a lot of energy. And finally, there are lots of receptor in the skin. It could be receptor for touch, it could be receptor for texture, it could be receptor for pain, pressure, temperature. All these receptors can get the information and then relay it to central nervous system so that nervous system can make the decision based on what. So if you touch something hot, the nervous system will know it because that receptor send the signal to your brain and spinal cord saying that, okay, this portion touching something very hot, which may disturb the homeostasis, and nervous system eventually will work. They send a signal on the muscle so that hand, this muscle probably contract, then you move your hand. So that's what you're going to learn in the nervous system. So skin is the part of it because that's the number one of that mechanism because they have the receptor. So this is in general function of the skin. So this is the microscopic structure of the skin. Now this structure is will help you to understand all the different parts of the skin. So first, let me explain here and then we'll go in detail. So this part right over here, that's a stratified squamous layer. So there's epidermis from here to here. The epidermis makes lots of like ups and downs. So basically if you imagine there are two ups and downs. From the epidermis, this goes down and the dermis, they go like this. So it's like, those corrugated cardboard, like they fit on each other. So this one, this is like epidermis, but the one that going in, so right here, the pink color one, that's called dermal papilla. Dermal papilla, and these are epidermal ridges. So those two together, kind of, this slide explains better. So these are the dermal papilla, and those epidermal ridges, they fit each other. So as if the top layer of the skin and the bottom layer of the skin, they're fitting tightly by that. Okay. So dermal papilla part of the dermis, we are going to talk about that later on. And then, so this is epidermis, that's dermis. These are the sweat gland right here, oil gland, this picture suggests oil gland, that's the hair. And right here, there are lots of nerves in the hair follicle area. These are the other type, the different type of receptors in this area. So that's pretty much the microscopic structure of the skin. So, and there's a set of smooth muscle which are attached to the hair, to the dermal papilla. And these smooth muscles, when they contract, hair stands up. We call them like goosebump. I can mention that later on as well. So this is the microscopic structure of the skin. So let's study the epidermis first. Okay. So epidermis, they're stratified squamous epithelia. So their main job is to keep the bacteria, fungus, yeast away from it. Okay, bacteria, fungus, and then like microorganisms, they can grow on the skin, but they are inhibited by the lot of antibacterial, antifungal peptide released by the sweat gland. So they cannot really literally grow easily on your skin. So they keep it different. And of course, the mechanical protections, okay? Because it is epithelial tissue, we learn in the tissue chapter, they don't have blood vessels. So they do not have blood vessels. But in the dermis layer, we have a lot of blood vessels. So this bottom part of the epidermis may receive the nutrients from the blood vessel right here through diffusion mechanism. We learn those things in the tissue as well. So from when the oxygen diffuse, the oxygen can go to this bottom layer. So this bottom layer of the epidermis, which is a name I'm going to mention later on, they can regenerate. And as soon as this goes up, they're like dead. So they are dead. And when you go on the top, you sometimes lose your skin cell. You're shedding here. So you're building here. That's undergo mitosis often. And so cell division takes place right here. And then when you are dead right here, you can lose from the top. So a lot of skin cells, and because they are these are epithelial cells, and we studied earlier that epithelial cells create a joint. So multiple skin cell comes together. Okay, So those are like dander. And those, when they mix with this oil secretion of the skin, we can call dandruff. Okay? We are very familiar with those things, that when you lose, that's part of this, okay? Now, this epidermis layer is distinctively either 4 or 5 layers, depending on a certain type of skin. Basically, thin skin has 4 layers, and thick skin has 5 layers, okay? Certain area of the body, you have palm and soles, you have a little bit thicker skin. So these 5 layers are called strata. Strata means layer. So the bottom one, stratum basale, or stratum basal, or some book will call stratum germinativum. Then the next layer, which is huge layer actually, called stratum spinosum. Then the layer called stratum granulosum. Then the clear layer, apparently called stratum lucidum, and then cornified cell called stratum corneum. So from the bottom to the top, these are the layers. So stratum basal, stratum basal or basale, and the stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, and stratum corneum. Okay, so this base layer, where they can, that's also known as stratum germinativum, and germ cell, meaning they're continuously dividing. These cells showing right here, they are undergoing mitosis because they can receive oxygen, they can receive nutrients, so they are pretty much alive, and they undergo cell division. Those cells keep going up, 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 and then finally the dead keratinocytes come from the top. So that's basically the structure of the epidermis. Now, what are these cells? What are these cells? Like, these are all squamous epithelial cells, but what kind of cells are these? Most of them are keratinocyte. 90% of those cells are keratinocyte. Follow the name. The answer is right there. Keratinocyte produce keratin. Keratin is a very strong protein. Is a protein that actually offer a lot of strength to the skin. So that is the one that protects your skin. That is the one that makes your body protected, because that is the one makes your skin very strong. So durability, they increase it. So that's keratinocyte. Melanocyte, they produce melanin. So of course we know that already, that melanin, that's like another 8% of the cell. So second number population. So melanin, what their function is very important to understand. Melanin is basically protect our cell DNA for mutation. So our cell DNA right here, they get mutated by, particularly from a lot of environmental things. The one easy thing is to understand is ultraviolet radiation from sun. So when the sun rays come and hit your body, the ultraviolet radiation or UV radiation, they can penetrate some cells and can mutate the DNA. And many mutations can cause cancer. So body needs to protect them. That's what they produce melanin. So if you look at the melanin, obviously gets one of the pigments responsible for the skin color. Now there are other pigments. So there is one slide later on, I'm going to mention that again, those depending on your blood vessels, like blood vessels, the amount of blood, and then other pigments along with melanin define your skin color. So darker the skin color means more the melanin. Now why it is so? That comes from evolution. So if you look at that, if you look at the earth structure near the equator, whichever population grow near the equator, okay, they are more darker skin, because that's where the most sun ray. So evolution takes place in such a way, so they protect it, because remember, only the fittest can survive. So nowadays, like Earth is kind of like flat, meaning a lot of immigration and a lot of global movement, like people move from one country to another, become very normal. But if you go back like thousands of years, those populations which are living under the sun most are darker skin. The more you go towards the pole, whether North Pole to or South Pole, the skin color become lighter, because you don't need to have that much melanin, because the sun is not the effective right that area. So that's the function of melanin. Langerhans cells and Merkel cells, these are the two less populated cells. Basically, Langerhans cells responsible for defense, So in the second part of the ANP2, you're going to learn in the immune system more. Right now, you just remember Langerhans cells is responsible for defending your body. So they provide immunity. And Merkel cells is one of the touch receptors. So the deepest layer of the epidermis, there are some touch of because most receptors are on the dermis. So these are the touch receptors. Merkel cells, sometimes also known as Merkel disc, because they look like a disc. That's why the name. Okay, so these are the four population of cells, majority is keratinocyte, make those 5 layers, make those 5 layers. Now, this is basically those epidermal ridges that I was talking about. So right here, if you look at this, these are dermal papilla, those are epidermal ridge, we call them. So the papilla means like a nipple-like structure. That's why the name papilla. So right here, these dermal papilla get into the dermal ridges. So they're kind of like interlocked, okay? They interlock. And these dermal papilla, these ups and downs, are genetically controlled. So your ups and downs and my ups and downs are not same. And they can actually, palms and the soles area, they can just showed up like this. There are 2 reasons for it, because it's increased the grip of the hands. That's how the evolution takes place. But this is genetically controlled, as I said, those ups and downs. So that's why fingerprint can be used as an identification, because your genetically controlled pattern will be different than other people. So those 5 layers, when you study sedum basal. First, we talked about that they're germinativum. So their main job is to keep regenerating more cells. And then when it comes up the top, the granulosum layer, why they're significant so much? So it's called, but before granulosum, it's called spinosum because of the junction that remember the epithelial cells, they are attached to each other because they're creating a sheet. When you dye the cells to see under the microscope, they kind of like pull each other, become like a tight, so the cell looks like they have a spine under the microscope. That's why they name it spinosum. Granulosum, because they have granules. What kind of granules? They have keratohyalin granules. Keratohyalin granules, all this together, they contain so much lipid and they repels water. So they make your skin kind of water resistant. So your skin become water resistant. They're not waterproof because water can go in eventually if they want to. They can go in, particularly if you are taking a if you're bathing for a very long time, or if you're in a pool for a very long time, you will see your soles and the hands, they have lots of bumps, like ups and downs. So they become like a wrinkle structure. So because water is going in and, in hypotonic conditions, so water goes in and they can create that. But there is also now recent study shows that there is also a nervous system part of it. So it is not only the cells here responsible for it, because the nervous system also part of it, because now we know that if the nerve is severed or nerve is damaged on the hand, those people cannot get those bumps, okay, when they go in the water. The reason, the probable explanation is when are you in the water, those more ups and downs can increase your grip so that you don't slip easily. But there are a lot of research still being going on. But anyway, so your skin is water resistant because of the keratohyalin granule. So what they're doing, they're allowing you not to lose water, because your skin always losing some water. Water will always, evaporate from your skin, which is commonly known as insensible perspiration. This is not perspiration. This is not sweat. This is just insensible perspiration happening. So you are losing half a liter of water every day. So a portion of your skin, if it's not there, you're going to lose a lot of water and you're going to die in dehydration. That's why, sometimes for burn victim, where the skin gets burned, it's very difficult for them to survive because they lose tremendous amount of water. And we studied that in the other chapter, that ocean water is hypertonic, so water leaves the body. So if you go to the ocean, and then the cell will connect, and you will lose a lot of water. So both things can happen, hypertonic and isotonic. So in the sternum basally layer or the germinating membrane layer, stem cell, they divide and they keep going. Those are keratinocytes, they keep going up. So it takes approximately a month to go up. And then, so, you know, for a month and a half, it takes time before you shed the cells. So that's basically all about epidermis. Dermis is pretty simple. They have two layers also. On the top, because of the dermal papilla, this top portion, there is no borderline, but this top portion we call papillary region, which is superficial. The deeper portion, more collagen fibers, so we call them reticular region because they have more collagen and elastic fiber to create a network of fibers. So the top part is the papillary region, the bottom part is the reticular region. So in this particular layer, this is dermis layer. So they have lots of blood vessels because epidermis does not have blood vessels. So this layer has lots of blood vessels. This layer also have collagen and elastic fibers. So those elastic fibers, they keep your skin tone. So when you lose them, when you age, that's when the skin appears like a wrinkle. Then you need those Botox and stuff like that. Okay, so in this layer, we also have macrophages. Those are defense cells. We have fibroblasts. Those are the stem cells. They, you know, we learned that in connective tissue. Those are the cells that keep this area. So this is connective tissue area. And this is the also area where you have the hair, glands, nerve, and blood vessels. Okay. So papillary layer, which is the top 20%, the bottom 80% of the dermis is the reticular layer. So papillary layer is composed of loose connective tissue. And a lot of elastic fiber as well. We know the dermal papilla. We talked about the dermal papilla. Right here, they contain a lot of Meissner corpuscles, which are also touch receptors, and the free nerve ending. So the nerve goes right there. The free nerve ending, they have like a pain and temperature sensation. That's why in certain area of your body, for example, your lip, the nerve ending goes all the way into the dermal papilla, so it can become even more sensitive. Okay, that's the reticular region. So this is dense irregular connective tissue. So not the loose ones, it's dense irregular connective tissue because they can have the stress from multiple directions, unlike tendons and ligaments that we studied earlier, because they have tons of collagen and reticular fibers. And they also have all the glands and hair follicle. So this area, we have the oil glands, sweat gland ducts, and all the hair follicles. This is the main area where provide the strength and elasticity to the skin. So sometimes, you know, because of obesity, sometimes the skin stretches, or simple cause like natural cause like pregnancy, when the connective tissue in this area stretches, they create like a stretch mark. So extreme stretching provide those dermal tears, those areas. This is the skin color one more time because of the melanin. So major presence is the melanin. We talked about that. And then the secondary component is called carotene. That's a yellow-orange color, like carrots. So that kind of color they have. Okay. So carotene and melanin together, along with, remember the blood vessels are there. So if somebody is anemic, and so their blood will be not so dark red, and somebody is not anemic, like a normal blood supply, they have a little bit dark color of red. So those shades of red and carotene, presence of carotene and presence of melanin together make this color of the skin. Okay, so there are certain things because this sometimes a lot of students ask me these questions about like freckles, albinism, and vitiligo. These are clinical observations. By the way, this is not a pathophysiology class. So I actually took these slides from my pathophysiology class. So this portion you can just read one time. I'm probably not going to ask any question from this area. Okay, this is just freckles or melanocyte in a patch. Albinism is basically you do not have this enzyme which can convert like tyrosine to melanin. So that tyrosinase is the enzyme. So if you don't have that enzyme, you cannot make the pigment. So you are, it's the symptoms called albinism. And vitiligo is an autoimmune disease. So they basically, your body's own immune system is working against the melanocyte. So melanin cannot be formed and it appears like a white patch. Okay. Now the accessory structures of the integumentary system. So accessory structure include hair, and there are other glands, but mainly we are going to study oil and sweat glands and nails. So let's study hair first. So your most hair, by the way, is not on the head. You have approximately like, if I remember correctly, the number is like 2.5 to 2.7 million hair. But out of that, like this is 500,000. So most of this is on your body. Okay, so because your body is covered with hair. It could be thin, but it is still there, except palm soles, side of the finger, they don't have it. Then lips and portion of the external genitalia, they do not have hair. What is the function? The main function is like insulation. So, you know, this is insulating your hair. Your hair is insulating so that heat cannot escape from it, and it protects. And there are some hair in the nasal passageways, in the ear canal, those who are protecting. So that's a defense mechanism, and it is very sensitive to a light touch. So body knows that something touched. So if an insect flies on your body, if your hair moves, the body instantaneously knows. So then body can react against that. So that's a part of the mechanism as well. Now, if you look at the hair structure, so it begins in the deepest layer of the dermis, which is the reticular layer. This is the better picture, I believe right here, this is a better picture to explain. So all these things which I wrote down, I am going to explain from this slide. So that's the hair root. Somewhere from here, right below, like whenever it is right below the epidermis, somewhere from here and the one that is exposed to your skin, we call hair shaft. This portion is like kind of non-living. That's why, but this part is living. This bottom part, which is, they call hair, the bottom of the hair root is called like a hair bulb or hair papilla, right there. So right here, you have tons of nervous system and tons of blood vessels. So a lot of sensitive nerve right there. So right here, this is lots of nerves and blood vessels. So because these cells grow, then when they grow, they slowly go up, exactly like the epidermis. They grow up and then dead, they go out. Okay. So this portion is definitely dead. So if you cut it here, then it will grow it again. So as soon as you cut it here, it will grow again, unless you destroy this hair follicle right there, which is made with like hair bulb and the papilla, hair follicle, you are going to get the hair back again. Now, this right over here, and there's somewhere in the middle portion of the hair, there is a smooth muscle, like a bunch of smooth muscle attached to the dermal papilla. So this is how they're attached. Like from here, they're attached to the dermal, right here, they're attached to the dermal papilla. So when this muscle contracts, the hair stands up, cause goosebump. Now, in a furry mammals, they have two reasons here. They can do better insulation, and then sometimes they become big, so that's a defense mechanism to their predator. But for us, it does not have that kind of detailed function, but we still have the response. Due to evolution, we still have the response, because in a stress or in a temperature sensitive conditions, our hair, or even if you're fear or raged, your hair stands up. Okay, they do not have a direct physiological role, but they do have the same reaction persist. Now, types of hair. The hair are mainly two types. We call them peach fuzz, like a lightly pigmented or vellus hair, which is everywhere in the body surface, and terminal hairs, which are like thickly pigmented hair or the dark pigmented hair. Now, during the time of birth, you have the dark terminal hairs are on the head, eyebrows and eyelashes. But later on, due to the presence of the sex hormones after puberty, then we have more in the armpit, pubic areas, limbs, all these areas grow more terminal hair. Okay, so these are just the two types of hair based on their structure. Functionality is pretty much same, but there is a group of hair that during the embryonic development, around like 3-month period, the whole body generates a lot of thin hair. Those are called lanugo. But they are very extremely fine and unpigmented, but they normally, like 99% time, they sheds before birth or right after the birth. So the lanugo, we can call them like embryonic hair. Okay, so during the embryonic development, body grows there. These are the glands. Okay, now these are all exocrine glands: sebaceous gland, sudoriferous gland, ceruminous gland, mammary gland. Now, mammary gland, which produce the milk, we are going to study them more in reproductive system because that's where their function is. Ceruminous glands, which are in the inner ear canal, that's a defense mechanism. They produce wax so that insects or larger particle cannot go into your ear. That you can also study this in the defense system. So right now we are going to focus on these two: sebaceous and sudoriferous gland. Okay, so sebaceous gland, which are commonly also known as oil gland. So they call it sebaceous because they produce sebum. So what is a sebum? Sebum is a combination of a lot of lipid, fat, like a lipid, so fat, along with a little bit steroid, which is cholesterol, and protein and salt mix. So this is literally a moisturizer. So it keeps your skin moist. So then remember, one of the main job is the skin not to lose water. So more soft, because if it is dry, it produces crack. So water can get lost more, even bacteria and fungus can go in. So to prevent all these things, to keep your hair and skin soft and pliable, we need moisture. This is our natural moisture. So this is our natural moisturizer that we use it. So the sebaceous gland, those they come out from the exocrine gland. So they have a duct release. Normally they share with the skin, as they share with the hair as well. So the oil comes, they make this hair also soft and pliable, and makes also skin better. Vernix caseosa, that's the layer of when the oil gland during the fetal development, last few months, become extremely important because the oil gland, for very simple reason, become very active. Because remember, if it is more oily, it's easier for the birthing process. That's the possible explanation. So that during that time, so oil gland become extremely active, and they put a superficial, like a coating on the skin. We call that vernix caseosa. So do not confuse with lanugo. That's the embryonic hair. Vernix caseosa is the oil. So that's the structure of the oil gland. Sometimes they can come directly their gland like this. Most of the time they share with the skin. So they use, not the skin, they share with the hair. So they basically use the same tunnel that comes out. Sudoriferous or sweat gland. Sudoriferous or sweat gland is two types: merocrine and apocrine. But here is the very important part. In the tissue chapter, when we study exocrine gland, we study merocrine and apocrine based on the mode of secretion. Okay, this is not like that. They name it because they thought it wrong, but they didn't change it. Okay, so for example, this one, apocrine gland, is not really apocrine secretion, but we didn't change the name. Okay, so in this case, do not confuse with those mode of secretion. This, just remember the name. This is a name. So for example, the sweat gland, the one that active all over the place that produces so-called sweat, it's called merocrine or eccrine gland. Nowadays we call them eccrine gland. That's all over your body. So what they do, they secrete sweat. So what is the function of sweat? Function of sweat to maintain your body temperature. Remember, hypothalamus control that. When you study homeostasis and negative feedback mechanism, I gave you this example that when you work harder, like exercising, your body generates a lot of heat. So to compensate that, because you have to release those heat, your hypothalamus send a signal to the sweat gland. Sweat comes out, evaporate from the body. And we know when water evaporates from the body, that takes away heat. So that is how body lose heat. And that is how we balance body temperature. So regulation of body temperature with the sweating is the main job of the sweat gland. pH is approximately 4 to 6.8, which is acidic. Remember, pH 7 is neutral. Below 7 is acidic. We want a slight acidic environment because bacteria or microorganism, fungus, they don't like acidic environment. So they are hostile towards acidic environment, so they die. So that's a physical defense. That's a defense mechanism for your body. It contains 99% water along with some salts, electrolytes, and some peptide with antibiotic properties. I mentioned earlier as well that the sweat gland, when they release antibiotic properties peptide, those can protect you from growth of fungus and bacteria on your skin. So that's a lot of function of a sweat gland. On the other hand, apocrine gland, which is, we call them sweat gland because that is how we thought about it, but they actually release an oily substance. Okay, and not only that, this is very interesting. Like they release that oily substance is actually nutrients for bacteria. So in your armpit, in your pubic region, around the nipple, generally those glands are active and they secrete there. And when they secrete, they intensify the odor. Okay. So now we know that this gland actually does the Marroquin type of secretion. Remember, simple exocytosis, but the name, we keep it still apocrine. So again, this is not a mode of secretion. This is the name. And interestingly, we don't know its physiological function. Like we do not know how physiologically it is helpful to us. Because in certain mammals, there are some research they discovered that because of the odor, some other mammals, they can use that body odor during mating season. Okay, but human, we don't go that way. We rather use like Match.com or some those kind of thing to get to know each other. So we don't know exactly what is the function of this, but that is the one that creates a lot of odor in the body. Okay. So that's the sweat gland. As I said earlier, ceruminous gland and mammary glands, detail not required. I'm not going to ask any question in the test about ceruminous and mammary gland, just read these two lines because these are both, you're going to cover it in the immune system as well as in the reproductive system. Then final part is the nails. So basically their main job is to protect your fingers and toes because of the mechanical distortion can happen. And that's the age. So that's why they protect it. Nail is protected. They are also dead cells packed with keratin, but the whole nail is not dead. The nail root portion, which is basically nail matrix in the nail root, which allow the growth. So right here, when you say nail production, nail root, detail of nail root coming up in the next page. So that allows the growth. So this is how the nail look like. That's the free edge of the nail. This area appears as a color. They don't have a color. Appears color because of your blood vessels underneath it. So it appears pinkish because of the lot of blood capillary, but actually this is like this. And these are like lateral groove on the two sides. So the nail goes like this way. This portion, which is called nail root, that portion the growth occurs. So in that nail root area, even when it is buried underneath that area is called nail matrix, deep in the nail root in this region, which is the main where the nail growth takes place. So where the nail growth takes place, nail matrix, because that is in the deep portion of the nail root. That's where the nail growth takes place. And right here, that eponychium or the cuticle, the one that we call, that's basically stratum corneum there. There's like a little bit overexposed stratum corneum layer from this area of the skin that create the cuticle. Cuticle actually protecting so that bacteria and other microorganisms cannot get a free ride into your body. Okay, and that white structure right there is known as lunula, like moon-like structure. So all our nail has it. So from thumb, we have the maximum lunula to your pinkies. If you notice your own finger, you will see that it's almost none. This is based on two things. One is based on the thickened stratum basal layer there, as well as there's an obscured blood vessel. So blood, when they make the blood vessel capillary, there is nothing there. So it does not appear pink, it appears a little bit whitish there. Okay, that's their structure, that's the anatomy. So their main job is to protect your top part of your finger and the toes. That's again, talking about nail matrix. So nail matrix, they just keep growing 1 millimeter per week. So that's pretty advanced, like, you know, they keep going. And if you cut this nail free edge, they will grow even furthermore. Okay, that's it. So basically, if you summarize this chapter, this is a very straightforward, simple, in my opinion, this is the smallest system that out of 11 that you're going to study. So first study the skin, which is the cutaneous membrane, then the accessory structures. So cutaneous membrane, it made it 2-layer, epidermis and dermis. Then we go detail of the, study the function of the skin, and then you go detail on the dermis. Dermis has the 4 or 5 layers, depending on thick and thin skin, and then stratum basal, stratum spinosum, granulosum, lucidum, and the cornea. So that's what the layers are, and you should know that. And then there are population of cells, keratinocyte, melanocyte, Langerhans cells, and Merkel cells in the epidermis. That's another area to study. Then we need to know the epidermal ridges and the dermal papilla. They go like interlock position, and those dermal papilla and epidermal ridges, those are they're genetically controlled. So everyone has their own pattern that ultimately shows up in your finger, which is fingerprinting or fingerprint. That's why you can use as an identification. Then you study the dermis. The top is the loose connective tissue. The bottom is the irregular dense connective tissue that can have the stretch from the multiple side. And then we have the, remember, hypodermis is not the part of the skin, but they are right there. So when you study skin, you may study hypodermis because that's right there anchoring the skin towards the deepest layer, okay? And then the accessory structure. Before you go to accessory structure, make sure you know the skin pigments, melanin, keratin, all those things. And then we go to the accessory structure, hair, hair structure, types of hair, hair function, and then glands. Out of 4, I told you to study 2 of them, sebaceous gland and sudoriferous. Sudoriferous 2, again, 2 more, eccrine or apocrine. And then comes the nail, and that's it. That's a structure. That's the whole chapter. Thank you.